So I've pretty much held all the different positions, senior leadership positions. So,
What is the most scared you have ever been?
I'm sure you've heard the E4 Mafia.
Any stories worth sharing?
Did a few deployments early on in 2001, 2002, 2003, 2005, 2018 deployment to Syria. I'm not sure if I was scared, but I will say that it affected me the most.
In today's episode, we spoke with Command Sergeant Major Michael Wong, the Senior Enlisted Advisor for the Rhode Island National Guard. In our conversation, we looked at how 30 years of experience in the Green Berets prepared him for his role as the Senior Enlisted Advisor for the Rhode Island National Guard. He saw a lot, experienced a lot, had some great stories to share. We talked about what soldiers and leaders can be doing to prepare themselves for the next generation. We talked about how important a reputation can be when serving inside a small community like the Green Berets or inside a small force like the Rhode Island National Guard. We talked a little bit about his goals and the thoughts and beliefs that got him through selection. We talked about the experiences, sights, sounds that shaped who he is today. It was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it. We're joined today by Command Sergeant Major Michael Wong, the State Command Sergeant Major for the Rhode Island National Guard. Sergeant Major, thank you for joining us.
All right. I appreciate the opportunity to have sit here and have a little chat with you for this podcast.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about, we're here to talk about leadership. And just to set a baseline, why don't you talk to our audience a little bit about who you are and sort of your career up to this point? Obviously, State Command Sergeant Major is kind of a big deal, about as high as you're going to go in the National Guard context. And clearly there's some background there. Why don't you fill us in?
Sure. So I signed the dotted line in October 17th of 1983, and I entered the service through the reserves up in Massachusetts. And in the back of my mind, I had always wanted to join Special Forces. And at the time, I did not know of the National Guard or the Reserve Special Forces at the time. And so I did my time in the reserves and the infantry. And then as my career progressed in the military, I found that there was a National Guard and Reserve Special Forces. And so in 1990, at the time I was living in Connecticut, so I had called and came down for an interview. And back in that day, 1990, that was Sergeant Major Doug San Antonio. And so I came down for an interview, and true to his persona, he was the old crusty Sergeant Major, and he asked me, what do you have to offer? And I said, just want a chance, sir. And he gave me that opportunity, gave me a chance. And so I entered the Rhode Island National Guard, went through selection, went to the Q course, and 35 years later, I'm still here. So it's been a long career. And then I was about to retire. I had a good career, and I was asked by the Adjutant General if I would consider the position of the State Sergeant Major job. And at first I said no, but then being here for so long in the Rhode Island Guard, wanting to give back to the Guard and wanted to see give back, and so I said yes. And so I've been here for about 2.5 years, doing the job as I am the 9th Command State Sergeant Major. So.
Were you in Special Forces or the Special Operations world the whole time?
Pretty much since 1990 till 2014, where I went to SGT, Special Operations Detachment Global. I spent a few years there, deployed with them in 2018, and then in 2022 is when the Adjutant General asked me to become the State Sergeant Major. So yes, I spent my majority of my career in this Special Operations branch.
So you spent the whole career in Special Operations, and here you are in very mundane, very real, very human operations. What about Special Operations prepared you to be the Senior Enlisted Advisor for a predominantly conventional force here in the state?
When I look at Special Operations, right, and what I literally went through a course and became qualified. So when I look at other soldiers, anybody that puts on the uniform has a job to do, and they go to a school, and that's the same. And I don't look at myself as above anybody else. I look at all soldiers that put on the uniform as equals, right?
What was it about Special Operations that attracted you initially?
So I'm a little bit older, and so I grew up in this, mid 70s. So back in the day, that was right in the middle of the Vietnam War at the time, and unbeknownst to me at the time, I didn't really, it didn't dawn on me, but what I saw on the news and what I saw in the articles and paper, when you hear the stories about special forces and their mission at the time was to, to help those that couldn't help themselves. And to me, that rang, a message with me. And as I got older and, I had wanted that drive to enter the service, I had commitments with my family, I'm family oriented. And so I put the military on hold per se for a little while. I went to college for a little bit. That didn't quite work out in the beginning for me, and then I entered the reserves as an option so that I could, one, serve the nation, and then two, also assist in my parents' business at the time. So that's what drove me to Special Forces. Again, it was growing up in the '70s, seeing that in the news, and wanting that role to help people that couldn't help themselves.
Did you end up getting to help people help themselves?
Oh, most definitely. So one of the missions that we do in Special Forces is, foreign internal defense, and that is to, go to host nation countries, help train and assist those nations that need us, that are asked for our help, to train them. We do humanitarian aid. So, yeah, we did fulfill that mission.
So the majority of your career has been dominated by the global war on terror. I mean, you enlisted. We were sort of at the tail end of the Cold War. You were there for the Gulf War, and then circa 2003,
Sure.
global war on terror.
Again, I signed in '83. Thought I'd do my 20 years, and thought I would had a successful career, and I would have called it quits. And of course, like you said, 9/11 happened, and the war kicked off, and there's one deployment after another, and so just prolonged my career in the military. Not saying it's bad. It was, we all signed the dotted line for a reason, and that is, to defend the nation or to, again, help those that can't. And so, again, instead of retiring, I stayed on and went and did a few deployments early on in 2001, 2002, 2003, 2005. Yeah, so it was busy early on in the 2000s, right after 9/11.
Any stories worth sharing?
I'm sure I got plenty of stories. Again, it's deployments are all to me is what you make out of it. And I tell soldiers now, or I have been telling soldiers, you're going on a deployment. It doesn't matter where you go, but you make the best of what the situation you're dealt with, right? And so if you can better yourselves during the deployment, keep yourself engaged. I hate to use the term that Bill Belichick has coined, but I've been using this for years, which was do your job, right? And so, I tell, soldiers early on, like, you deploy, you do your job, and you will succeed. And that's the message I've been telling all my junior soldiers.
No, that's a good message. I like that message. When did you pin on your stripes? When did you become an NCO?
So I was when I was in the reserves, I was in Massachusetts Reserves in the 187th Infantry, and I had pinned it on fairly early. I spent 7 years in the reserves, and during that time, I attained the rank of E6. But as an E6, I was the acting platoon sergeant for an infantry company. I got promoted fairly quickly. I did my job, and obviously my superiors had seen that, and so although I didn't hold the rank, I was afforded the opportunity to hold that position as a platoon sergeant as an E6. So I started early on in the NCO rank, but then once I made it to the Rhode Island Guard and entered into the Special Forces, my rank. It took me once I got qualified, then I was I made E7, and I was E7 for probably almost 10 or 11 years. And it wasn't because of it was just the nature of the Special Forces, right? As a senior NCO in that position, it's just and being in the Guard, it's just the opportunities for advancement at the time was just people. I refer to the Guard as dog years versus active duty. So if things take a little bit longer, things take a little more time. People stay a little bit longer in positions in the Guard than they do on active duty. Active duty, you're in a duty position maybe 2 to 3 years, and you move on, right? And the Guard here, we tend to stay a little bit longer. And honestly, I was more than happy. That was, to me, the E7 on a Special Forces team was probably the best time of my careers.
Why is that?
You're not necessarily in charge. You're not the E8 team sergeant, but you are the senior NCO for your MOS, and so you get to, you have one or two individuals underneath you, and you get afforded the opportunity to have a lot of responsibility, but not so much as the E8 team sergeant. So it's a good rank.
Okay. So you weren't junior enlisted for very long, but
I was not.
What was the hardest part of that transition, if you can remember all the way back?
At that time, it was, we talk about mentoring, right, and knowing your job and doing your job, right? It was trying to understand that. And at the time, it wasn't that I had poor leaders. It was that I don't think at the time, I said E3 and E4. The mentoring wasn't there, and so I sought that out myself, and I think that's what made me a little bit step above my peers. And so hey, what do I need to do? They teach you, right, or they embellishing you to not only know your job but know the job of your next hire, right? So then you can move on, and that's what I took for granted, right? So I learned the job of my next hire, and I think that's what made me progress a little bit faster than my peers.
How did you how did you know you needed to go and seek that out? And who did you seek that out from? I mean, you identified hey, I need to know these things, and I'm not getting them from right now. How did you go about finding that?
I think it was more of I didn't seek anybody out at the time. It was just more of one of these aha moments of where, I saw that, I was doing my job, and I thought that I hit a little bit of a plateau of what my job was at that time. And I said, well, if I know my job, right, what do I need to do to get to the next level here? And I don't think I was really getting that per se at the time. And so I sought that out, and asked. And, one of my mantras to soldiers now is nobody manages your career except for you, right? Like you can't expect, we're supposed to mentor and counsel our junior soldiers, but when they're not doing that, then the responsibility is up to the individual to go out and do that, right? To manage their own career, to look out for themselves, and to seek that, whatever they can do to better themselves, to make them marketable for that, either want the next position, the next rank, a different job or better job, or, just to go out there and to seek out themselves.
So here we are, about 40 years later. Do you think we're doing a good job preparing our E4s to pin on their stripes?
I can say that probably I will say no, based on our last 20 plus years of the war on terrorism, that we've promoted based on time and not necessarily on knowledge or experience. So Sergeant Major of the Army has when he first took over, he referred back to basics of blue books and hip pocket training, right? And that was back when I first started in the early mid 80s, right? It's a hip pocket training. Pull out the blue books. Learn. Understand and learn your skills. Take time, manage your time. Take the time when you do have some white space, right? Have your junior enlisted sit down and even if you just talk about a subject or whatever it may be, because I see that a lot of our I say not only our junior soldiers, all soldiers nowadays are so ingrained in their phones and electronics that whenever they have downtime, it's the first thing they do. They pull out their phone and they're surfing the web or checking emails, versus hey, pull out the blue book and go over a certain skill set that you might have time for, even if you just talk about it. And so I don't think that we're doing our our junior enlisted we're not preparing them correctly currently.
For the sake of our audience, can you explain what the blue book is?
It was just a skills, based on your MOS. You had a list of tasks that you were, based on each level that you were expected to know, and then if, like I said, if you had at certain times, you could pull out the blue book and you could go over certain tasks, based on what your MOS was.
So that's like a very team leader, squad leader centric kind of time management is what
Sure.
that sounds like.
Yes.
What can a platoon sergeant, what can an E7 do to help bring up the next generation, to better train and prepare our E4s to become NCOs?
So, the E7 rank in this at this point, they have to look. They're to me, they're like the middle manager, right? They're not the senior NCOs, or they're not the command team, but they're also not the junior, right? So they're caught in the middle. So one, they have to ensure that they know what the commander's intent, right, and what his philosophy and what his mission is, right? And then he has to convey that to his soldiers, and to make sure that the training that he is training the junior soldiers towards is whatever the commander's intent is. And so he has to me, the E7 has to be able to manage, understand for us the yearly training calendar, right? See what's on there, and to make use of all available time, so that when they have time with his junior soldiers, when there's any white space, things happen, right? Planning is only the first step, but no matter how good a plan is, always something falls through, and so if you have some downtime, then the E7 needs to take over and delegate his junior enlisted to take that time to use it appropriately.
You've been a senior enlisted advisor before, right? This isn't your first sergeant or command sergeant major gig?
No. So I was and when I was in Sgt, I was a senior enlisted for the commander at the time there in 06, and then when I deployed in 2018 to Operation Inherent Resolve, I was stationed up in Syria. So I was a senior enlisted for an 06 up there, responsible for the air base, the 2 air bases, and pretty much the entire FOB of northern Syria.
How has being a senior enlisted advisor differed? Like, what's your daily life? How is it different than when you were like a more true green tab type position?
Like the tag, it's not only the military side of it; it's also the the state requirements and the dealing with the civilians, the local populace here within Rhode Island here. So it's not just the military that we have to address. We also have to look at the interests of our, the governor, and what his interests are, or what his asks are too. So we have our state responsibilities to the disaster, DISCO mission. So we have to take that into consideration, and to be able to be fully mission capable to fulfill that obligation, and also for our federal mission too.
Did you ever get the chance to be that E8 Special Forces team leader?
I was. So my career I've risen through all the ranks. So as an E7, senior weapons sergeant in Alpha 219 in Middletown, I rose to the ranks. E7 in 2005, we deployed to Iraq. I was promoted to E8. I was the team sergeant of a operations detachment. One of 2 teams deployed to Iraq. I spent a deployment for that, came back, and then at that time, the company sergeant major retired in 2013, I believe, and so then I took over as a company sergeant major for Alpha 219. Spent probably about 18 months there, and then when SAG, when they redeployed in 2014, is when I moved on. So I've pretty much held all the different positions, senior leadership positions within the SOF world.
Okay. The officers that you get in the teams, they're typically not fresh out of BOLIC second lieutenants the way that the conventional Army has. they're slightly more senior than that, right?
Yeah, yes, early on, it's always typically, either a senior first lieutenant, or a captain that goes through the course. I think it's changed a little bit now in the last couple of years, but still, it was an experienced captain that would become a team leader. So yeah, they had a few years, either one as enlisted and they converted and became an officer, or they came off of active duty as an officer. So yeah, they had a little bit more experience within the officer career.
So even with a little more experience, I assume at some point you had a disagreement. What's the worst disagreement you've ever had with anyone who was supervising you?
Again, I don't think I've had one. I'm fairly, my heart rate is 65. I don't get excited. I look at the facts, right? And this might, so I will, because I've been a National Guard for the last, 30, 40 years, I've also I have also had a civilian career. So I'll bring that up. So I've been a state trooper for Massachusetts since 1996, right? And so when I look at individuals, to me, in my character, when I look at people, everybody gets a fair shake, and everybody starts off on a level playing field. And I allow the individuals to raise that bar or to lower that bar, and then I'll base my judgments on the individual. But talking with officers, and dealing with them, we have a cordial conversation about whatever it may be that we have, that might come into play, and we just discuss it, right? And if they want to raise something to some point, I was like, all right, it's like winning battles and wars, right? All right, I might have lost this battle, but if we might have another disagreement on something else, and I might have to persuade you on my point of view. But again, it's just a little bit of give and take, and there's nothing out there that to me is worth that much of a disagreement upon that would hamper or hinder a good relationship between you and your superior that you've built up over the years.
It really is different for the Special Forces community. You really just don't have that fresh out of West Point, knows everything, top of his bullet class is going to take the world, future Patton coming in and taking over a platoon for you guys.
No. Well, again, I don't think that when you look at me that I would fit the role of what you would think of a Special Forces soldier would be, but again, it's not, I hate to say it, when you think of Navy SEALs, right, you have this picture in your mind of what that looks like. When you think of Special Forces, like, oh, well, you might have a picture in your mind of what it may look like. But to me, it's not only the brawn and the brute of being in Special Forces, it's also the other half of it is having that mental acuity and ability, right?
All right. So what I hear you saying is Green Berets, better mental acuity than Navy SEALs, and you guys don't write as many books. That's what I'm hearing.
I think they just have better PR.
Well, we can fix that here in Rhode Island at least.
We're trying to do our best and keep up with them, because I'll put a plug out there for Tim Kennedy. Jeez, I forgot his name already. Tim Kennedy. So he's our. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen him. He's a UFC fighter, and so we'll have to get him up there and sell a few more books and maybe make a movie or something.
Yeah. Well, if you want to write a book, you let me know. I'll help you with that. I'm level-headed and haven't fought with anyone. That'll sell millions of copies.
I got a lot of chapters. Might be empty chapters, though.
A lot of chapters of not fighting with anyone. Yeah. Should be a good book. All right. So what advice would you have for a young soldier who wants to be a good leader? Maybe it's never been modeled. Let's pretend it's never been modeled for them. They don't really know what a good leader is, but they know they want to be one. What advice do you have for them?
Sure. Well, again, going back to know your job, right? If you don't know what your job is, right, and your reputation will precede you, right? So if you're someone that's out there that doesn't know his own or her own job, right? How do you expect them to be telling you, the soldiers below them, to do their job when they can't even do their own job? So right? So know your own job, right? Know what your responsibilities are. Don't don't worry about what other people are doing. Worry about what you're doing. Again, your reputation, whenever it precedes you, good or bad, right? People have that predetermination of you. And so he's either bad or good, and then you have a certain expectation to live up to, right? So if it's, if people hear about you and it's bad, well, then you show up you show up for first day, and what's going to happen? They already know that, well, this individual has a bad reputation, and they already put you on a pedestal, below the pedestal, right? Or on the other hand, hey, I heard good things about this individual, and you show up for work and you don't meet those expectations, right? Then, they lose. You didn't meet the standard, and they say, oh, this guy's not what he said he was, and now he's I'm not gonna say fraud, but he's not meeting the expectations here. So I would say, one, do your job, know your job, right, and conduct yourself, appropriately. As easy as that sounds, we live by these Army values and standards. We say them, but as you read in the newspaper, we see so many soldiers that are getting in trouble for miscellaneous incidences. But I try to tell them, like, honesty and selfless service. If you don't live by that, then you're not doing justice to yourself or the organization.
I can definitely confirm that, at least in an organization our size, about 3,000 give or take, your reputation absolutely precedes you. So I got to command a company twice, and in both cases, it was first day. Among the very first conversations I had, I got pulled aside first in the first company by my senior enlisted advisor. Hey, these are the guys. This is this guy. This is this guy. This is this guy. Here's how they perform. Here are the troubles. Here are the problems. Here's the good stuff. I mean, just like laid it all out. Second time around was my Red NCO. Hey, sir, welcome to the company. This is this guy. This is this guy. This is this guy. Here are your performers. Here are your non-performers. It was like day one. Like I had not shook their hand. I had not met them, and it was already, oh, that guy's a troublemaker. This guy is a performer but doesn't want to stay in the Army. We've got to bring him back. On and on and on and on. And it came back later, right? So I took that second company. We went overseas. We did some G.I. Joe stuff in the sand. And as is wont to do, some of them got in a little bit of trouble while they were over there, and I had to do commander things. And lo and behold, if you are just slightly below center, if you're like a 49th percentile kind of performer, and you get yourself in a little bit of trouble, the whole world starts piling on your back.
Sure.
And everyone just come into the commander's office and be like, this person is a dirtbag. Get rid of him. You're like, holy cow. Like, we're talking about a 49th percentile performer. Like, we're not talking about a dirtbag. We're talking about someone just a hair below average. But, that was my experience. That reputation absolutely is everything. And it's hard to get back once you lose it.
Sure. Going back to your, taking command and talking to either the first sergeant or maybe, or, telling you that this person's the good one, this one's the bad one. To me, it's like, all right, well, I take that with a grain of salt, right? Because, I tell soldiers, personal, professional relationships is a fine line, right? So going back to, was this individual giving insight into these people based on his own opinion, or was it, personal, because he didn't like somebody, or what? So, it goes back to, I always say, I give everybody, to me, everybody starts off on a level playing field, and I leave up to the individual to either prove themselves, right, or to prove their reputation is bad and they do bad. But to me, everybody gets an open, starts level playing field, and good things or bad things that I hear about people, like, all right, that's fine, that's nice to know, but you know what? I'm going to let them show me that that is correct. That they're either one, that they're a poor performer, or two, they're a good performer. But on the other hand, I also tell the senior leadership that, look, it's when you tell me that you have a poor performing soldier, whose responsibility is it to ensure that that soldier succeeds? I tell them it's their job. Because have you counseled the soldier? Because if the soldier doesn't know he's performing poorly, then it's your job to make sure that he understands that, right, and to tell him what he needs to do to better himself.
Amen.
And if you don't do it, then that's your responsibility, because then you're failing as a senior leader by not doing your job, by not telling that soldier. And to me, what I've seen is people have a hard time having those honest conversations with soldiers. And instead of counseling, what they'll do, in human nature, right? They'll turn around and tell their buddy, oh, that soldier over there is not a good soldier. He does poorly, he does bad, or whatever. And then they tell another soldier, and so that's the reputation gets built up on that. But again, that's why I look at it like, it's all here to me. It's all hearsay, until that soldier proves to me, that either one, that's correct, or no, or that soldier's a good soldier. And it just needs to be, needs that little bit of a nudge, or not. Or if they're doing well, then they need to, be told that. Again, it's not always negative; it could be positive too. So,
yeah. So, I mean, amen. That is a leadership belief that I hold very strongly. It is very rare, not non-existent, but very rare that a soldier wakes up in the morning and looks in the mirror while they're shaving, brushing their teeth, and is like, "Today, you and I are going to screw this all up. We're going to botch it all." Like, very rare. So I've had about 200 soldiers. I counted them up about a year ago. I've had about 200 soldiers work for me over the course of my career. And in only 2 cases, literally only 2 cases, has a soldier, when told, hey, this is the standard, you're not meeting it, this is what you need to do to meet the standard. Only in 2 cases has that not worked. So literally every other soldier I've ever had, first sergeant says that's a bad soldier, readiness NCO says that's a bad soldier, platoon sergeant tells me they're unsalvageable. Are there any counseling statements? Have you ever told them they're not meeting the standard? You bring them in, you counsel them, hey, this is what we expect of you, do this, this, and this, meet these standards. In only 2 cases has that not worked. And then in those 2 cases, we separated them from the Army.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was sort of like a mutually agreed on thing. It wasn't a good fit for them. Okay, fine. By all means, I wasn't upset. Hopefully I didn't hurt their feelings too badly, but it's not a great fit. Time for you to go.
Yeah, personal and professional relationships, right? You just, when people can't work with people, well, the people, is it based because they don't like them or they can't do their job? I take the personal side out of it. I look at, we just had our we just had our all call last week, and that was one of my messages was like, I'm not here to take care of people. I'm not here to screw anybody. I'm here looking for the best person for the job, right? Or the best, for whatever it may be. And so, I look at, again, not the individual, personally. I look at, their competency. Can they do the job? And if they can, I'll put them in that position of where it may be. If they can't do the job, then all right, then it's time to move on or to find yourself another job, and I'll move them along. But again, it's not personal, But again, it goes back to, you talk about mentoring our junior soldiers, and I think I don't think like I said, we've lost sight of that in preparing our junior soldiers for that and having those honest conversations with them.
How do you know someone's ready for the next level?
Again, it goes back to, when I look back and myself, again, like you look at the people that are doing not only are they doing their job, but they're looking doing additional jobs or taking on more roles of responsibility, more so than you would expect from a person from that rank, right? I'm sure being in command, I'm sure you've seen, soldiers that are, when they have time, right? It's like, what are you supposed to be doing here? And they do, I was like, I'm supposed to be doing A, B, and C. I'm done. And then they're sitting around, right? Not utilizing the time appropriately or just, not taking that initiative to further pursue themselves, right? And then you have the other soldiers that are like, hey, what are you doing over here? It's like, oh, I just did A, B, and C, and I'm looking at about C, D, and E. Like, oh, really? Like, what's, and you talk to those individuals, it's like, oh, man, those soldiers are the ones that have that either one, the vision, the initiative, and the responsibility to look out, for themselves, or, that's the nature of their character, that those are the people that you want to look for. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've noticed fairly consistently, you can go to almost any organization, you'll see this behavior, that there are people who just sort of naturally rise to lead their little clique, right? Everyone's got their group of friends at drill. It could be a small group of 3, could be a larger group of 10, but everyone sort of has these friend cliques that hang out. And there's always somebody in that group who has more influence than the rest. I'm not going to use the word natural leader, but they just sort of influence that group, and they're easy to spot. You can just point them out and be like, that's the guy who sets the attitude for this group. And there are humans who use that power for good, and there are humans who use that power for ill. And you'd watch this group, and okay, in this little group, this human is the most influential, the most charismatic, whatever. And the whole group gets dragged down because that person just uses the power for ill.
Sure.
You look over in the other group, the only real difference is the natural leader of that group is the people, uses that power to motivate them, and they're just doing a better job. And that one guy putting a little energy into that group, everyone performs better, and the whole group gets a lot of work done. And it's not hard to spot. There's no special talent in seeing this. You can just sit in the motor pool and literally just watch. Just watch as everyone finds their friends.
Oh, sure.
Oh, hey guys, we're going to PMCS the vehicles this morning. It's just everyone will immediately find their friends and go pick a vehicle, and you'll just see, all right, that group's standing around, not, takes them an hour to PMCS a single Humvee, and they come back with a 5988 that's completely blank. Oh, we didn't find any deficiencies. Yeah, okay, buddy. Let's get back out there. And the other group comes back. They've done 5 vehicles, perfectly annotated everything, and they're smiling, and they're having a good time. Like, okay, that guy's probably ready for a little more leadership.
Sure.
I'm ready to put that guy in front of a squad and have him positively influence all 11 other members.
Yeah. Again, you recognize the ability of the individual. You empower that individual, right? You talk about our junior leaders now. Like, back in the day, I'm sure you've heard the E4 Mafia and how much, I say 20 plus years ago, when the E4 was given so much, in essence, the word authority per se, or given so much more responsibility back in the day. I hate to say, like, because of the last 20 years of where we promoted based on time, meaning like, I've been at E3 for 3 years. I should be promoted to E4 now. And, they wave the hand and they're promoted, not because of their knowledge or experience, just because of time. So was that soldier ready for that E4 and taking on that responsibility? Sometimes yes, but most likely probably no. And it goes up to the ranks. Like, now with the new change in our promotions, professional military education of that was just passed recently, of where you no longer need basic leader course to make E5 sergeant, and it's just all based on points. You get promoted. Like, to me, it's just So where's that E4 to learn how to become a junior NCO? If it's not by the mentoring or from peers, and if they don't get it through that, then they're not going to have any formal military education to prepare them for the next rank. So that's, again, it's I don't 100% agree with that new promotion system or military education system, but that's the way it is, and so we'll have to deal with it. And so it leaves more up to the commanders and the first sergeants and leadership to manage their soldiers, to ensure that their soldiers are ready for promotion based on their experience and knowledge, and not just based on time. So I think a lot more onus is on the command teams to manage their soldiers now, and to have those honest conversations with them. Like, hey, look at, just because you've been here for 3 years, we don't think you're ready for E5 or E6, right? And so the recommendation, it's the commander's recommendation, so it's going to have to, it's going to take a little more work in managing their soldiers, to ensure that our forces knowledgeable, and experienced and capable of holding that next rank.
I didn't even begin to understand how little I knew about company command until I was done with my second company command. Came in as a lieutenant, and like all lieutenants, I knew everything, right? Took over a company. I was going to change the world. I was going to fix everything. Went from one command to the next. And I was like, oh, I learned even more. Now I know everything. I know double everything. It wasn't until after my second command I got into real staff work and could look back at the company structure from a brigade staff. And I said to myself, holy cow, I didn't know anything about what I was doing. Nothing.
Sure.
And I imagine that's still true today. Like, I imagine 10 years from now, I'm going to look back at my brigade staff time and say, holy cow, I didn't know anything about what I was doing. Has that ever happened to you? You ever look back at yourself?
Well, going back into, let's say your company time, right? So from the company side, you're constantly looking at requests from higher, right? And so because you don't know, you're always like, well, why do they want this? Why do they need this? Why are they asking us to do this? But now that you've had the staff time, now you say, now you understand it. And so that's one of, for coming from the soft world that we were just discussing this, is that, more of our senior leaders need to work at that higher level to understand what that, not necessarily the tactical level, but to understand the organizational structure and know what those requirements are, so that when you go back and do, let's say, a company coming in time, it's like, hey, you understand. So, go to battalion staff, right? See how that works. And then when you take command, you probably would have helped you probably understand that command role better. So that's one of the things that we talk about for our senior leaders for Alpha 219, and send them to SAG and go and do some staff work so you understand what those asks are and how this all fits in the big picture.
So we've talked a little bit about senior enlisted advisors. We've talked a little bit about junior NCOs, but there's kind of a middle ground in there, right? Like, you're an E6 and an E7 for a while.
Yes.
Right. People can get not stuck, but people can live in that squad leader, platoon sergeant middle ground for a long, long time.
Sure.
Tell me about what they should be doing.
We look at, we talk about promotions and promoting people too early. But, honestly, like, if you make it to, to spend 20 years, you retire as an E7, that's just, to me, that's a successful career, right? You make E8 or E9, that's like, all right, that's a bonus, right? And even for officers, right? If you make, 04, 05, that's a successful career after 20 years, right? And so when you look at the progression of an enlisted soldier, right? If you do a couple years as a private, or you get, E2, right? You do that for two years, maybe, if that, or, 6 months, 7 months, you do well, and there E3, and E3 for a couple years. So by the time you make E6, an E7, you have probably, I would hope so, probably at least 10, 11 years or so, I'd imagine, right? Or as an E6, or that 8-year mark, maybe you make E6, right? You do that for about 4 or 5 years and do your job well, right? And then you make E7 at maybe the 13th, 14th year, and, you do your 20 years and you're in E7. Going back to getting promotion, people are like, oh, I've been to E7 for so long, I should make E8 now. Well, again, so what are you basing that on? Is it based on because of, again, your time, or are you basing that because of your experience and your positions that you've held? And I can say that from people I've heard, most of the asks or the demands are that, oh, I've been to E6 for 8 years, I need to be promoted. Like, no, you don't. Like, do your job, successfully, and then we know that you can do that job and that you have potential to become the next rank, then you'll get promoted. But people, like I said, soldiers these days are asking to get promoted based on time and not because of their experience.
What's the hardest thing you've ever done in the Army?
Let's see. Probably my time going through selection. the selection, Special Forces Assessment and Selection, was a 2-week course that you needed to graduate from before you were selected to go on to the qualification course or the Q course for Special Forces. It was a test, and that's what it meant for.
Did you have a moment where your mind had to overcome your body? Mind over matter?
Quite a few times. It was a physically demanding course, and at some point, again, when people ask me about going through selection or why they want to go through Special Forces, I tell them that you have to first ask yourself why you want to go through that program. Right? Some people say, "Oh, well, my grandfather did, or my father was in it, or I think I want to kick in doors and I want to do this." And then when you get down there, and the first time it gets hard, like, "Oh, this, I'm not going to go. I'm not doing this," and they quit. Right? But the person that goes down there with a purpose and understands what he's going to get out of what he's going there for, it's like, why am I here? Because I want to get this through this little hurdle so I can get to the next hurdle, to the next hurdle, to the next hurdle, and I would get myself through it.
So what's the why at the end? One hurdle after the next. What's the big why at the end?
To don the Green Beret and to go out and into the world and help those that couldn't help themselves. Before 9/11, and I did my 20 years, like, all right, I've checked that box, and at that time it was a E8. No, I was an E7. I felt that, I've had a good career, and I was satisfied with that. But then again, the war kicked off, and that changed it all, and so I stayed, and another 20 years went by. But again, it's like I've had a good career. I never planned on staying this long, but again, it's one, having afforded the opportunity to do my job, and two, to give back to the organization.
What's the scariest thing you've ever done? Actually, let me change the phrasing of that question just slightly. What is the most scared you have ever been?
The most scared that I've been. That's a tough one now. Let me think about this. I'm not sure if I was scared, but I will say that it affected me the most. One, being in the SOF, Special Forces, and two, my civilian career. I've seen some horrendous accidents and seen some deceased individuals. So I wouldn't say that scares me, but I will say what's affected me the most, though, is in my 2018 deployment to Syria, we had a coalition force soldier and a U.S. soldier that were badly injured, and I had to deal with the mortuary affairs because that was the mortuary affairs unit was on my post, or was on my FOB, and as a senior enlisted, I was responsible for all actions on the FOB, so I had to deal with that, and deal with the individuals themselves, deal with the members from the team, deal with everything that was associated with that was what's affected me the most. I wouldn't say scared, but that affected me the most.
What was different about it? Why did that one affect you more than?
I think because of how it affected everyone else. Not necessarily, it's for the nature of the situation, what had happened to the individuals, how it affected the soldiers, his unit and his soldiers, how it affected the whole chain of command up, which went pretty high up, and then have to deal with that to get them back to their families. That was.
What advice or recommendations do you have for NCOs who are going to have to face sort of horrifying, scary, life-altering things?
Well, I can say, like, even I'll refer back to that same incident of where our merger affairs was a team of 4. one sergeant and 3 specialists. And those 3 specialists had never seen, they went to school, but had not seen anything that to that magnitude or to that level. And so they had a hard time dealing with it too. Not only with the individuals, but then also with the, like I said, the team and how that, the interaction with the team that they had to deal with. It's nothing that, it's not something you can teach. It's not something that you can relate to, I don't think, until you actually experience it for yourself. And then it's just one of those situations where you literally, take a breath, count to 10, think about the situation, and it's literally like an out of mind or out of body experience of where, you have to deal with the situation at hand, and don't, try to take the personal side out of it, and, remember that you have a job to do and to make sure that that job is done in a respectful way.
Switching gears to a slightly more uplifting topic.
All right.
So you're a State Command Sgt. Major. What are your priorities? What do you want to accomplish before you retire?
What do I want to accomplish? I want to ensure, one, the organization as a whole, but more so for the enlisted corps, that they are set up for success, right? So, part of my job is to manage the AGR, the Active Guard Reserve Force, to make sure that the right person is on the right job, right? On the MDA side, the force overall is that we continually are managing the positions, managing the units that to ensure that they're fully one, manning wise. If you hear nationwide that we're having problems with recruiting and retention, but I can say that our recruiters have done a tremendous job. We're like 112% of recruiting. So right, manning of our units, right, to make sure that our units are doing their job and sending in referrals, so that our manning is at hopefully at 100% or not plus, right, to make sure that they're mission capable, right, make sure they're physically fit, so when the bell rings, that Rhode Island National Guard is ready to answer the bell. So hopefully, before I leave and get all our units 100% and they're all mission capable. So that's hopefully that's my goal, and hopefully I can accomplish that.
All right. What message would you like to give to the leaders and NCOs of the Rhode Island National Guard?
Going back to Bill Belichick, right? Do your job. Don't worry what the next guy's doing. Worry about what you're doing. Back in when 9/11 happened, and I'm sure that what the picture that sticks in my mind was the Marine that sat on the tarmac that said, "Hey, we got to go to war," and the Marine sat on the tarmac, declined to deploy, or some of the excuses were like, "Well, I signed up for education, not to go to war," right? I hate to say this, though, but we all signed dotted line for one reason, and that was to serve and defend and protect the United States, right? So, we need to ensure that our soldiers understand that we're here for one purpose, and when the bell rings, that we answer that bell. I understand we have family, we have, the traditional National Guard soldier has jobs, but again, we have a mission there to do, right? And either federally, right, or domestically. When the bell rings, we have to answer the bell, and there should be no excuse as to why we're here.
All right. Well, that's all I've got for questions.
All right.
Thank you for joining us today, Sergeant Major. It was a real pleasure to have you on.
All right. Well, appreciate it, and appreciate the time, and feel free if there's any questions. And as I've always said, my door is open. Cliche, but my door is always open. I'm more happy to talk to anybody, and anybody has questions. So feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.